Hey curious cats, my name is Sahara. Welcome to that true crime channel. Let's get into it. For tonight's case, we're going to a place where summers are winters and winters are summers. You guessed it, New Zealand. And it starts with a woman named Grace. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born on December 2nd, 1996 in Wickford, Essex in England. Among other things, she loves music, she likes traveling, she plays hockey. After she graduates from Lincoln University with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing, she decides to take a gap year. On October 2018, she flies to South America, which is going to be the first stop in her travels. About a month later, on November 20th, she arrives in New Zealand, and after about 10 days, she gets to the city of Auckland on November the 30th. The next day, December 1st, she goes on a date with a guy named Jesse, a guy she met through Tinder, the dating app. Jesse Shane Kempson was also born on the month of December on the 28th in 1991 in Wellington, New Zealand. His parents split up when he was very young. I think he was like 4 or 5 years old, and he lived with his father and his grandfather. And it is said about his dad that he would sometimes be physically violent with his son. His father remarried and he had other children, so Jesse grew up in a mixed match family. Between 2013 and 2016, Jesse moved to Australia and nobody really knows what he was doing over there. And after 3 years, he came back to New Zealand and he mostly worked as a bartender. Apparently, he got arrested a couple times for drunk driving and disorderly behavior, but we don't have any further details on this. Let's talk about the timeline of the date. So, the romantic encounter happened on December 1st, 2018. We can see Grace arrives at Sky City at 5:45 p.m. Sky City is a casino and event center. It's a sort of entertainment center. You have casinos, food and drinks, and hotels. It's like a mini Las Vegas located at the base of Sky Tower. The Sky Tower, it looks like this if you don't know what it is. It kind of looks like the Needle in Seattle. It's December, so there's a huge Christmas tree inside Sky Tower, and on the footage, Grace is seen taking a picture of it and she sends it to her parents. She meets up with Jesse, he greets her with a hug. At 6 p.m., they're seen entering the casino and walking to Andy's Burger Bar. They order drinks and find a table. At 7:12 p.m., the couple leaves the burger bar and they go across the street to a Mexican cafe where they will spend the next hour or so. Here you can see Jesse paying the bill, gentleman that he was, and Grace is standing next to him. So far, a pretty normal date. Everything's great. They're enjoying each other's company. At 8:27, they're seen crossing Albert Street. They're getting closer and closer to Jesse's apartment, but they don't go there yet. They go to another bar called the Bluestone Room, and you can see them kissing. At 9:41, they enter the hotel where Jesse lives. Yeah, for some reason he lives in a hotel room. As you can see, they're in the elevator. It looks like they had lots of fun and they don't want the night to end. So far, so good. As you probably remember from the date of birth that I gave you for Grace, December 2nd, so the day after the date, is her birthday. She's turning 22. So obviously she receives a lot of messages from family members and friends wishing her a happy birthday, but she doesn't respond to any of them. I'm guessing that for some time, maybe her parents thought that, she's in New Zealand, there's a big time difference, she's traveling, she's having fun, she probably met some people and she's probably celebrating with them. December 3rd, no response. December 4th, no response. So they decide to call the local authorities. Police calls the hotel she was staying at. They check and confirm that she did not come back to her room since December 1st. On December 7th, her father is worried sick, as you can imagine, so he decides to fly to New Zealand to look for her. He's interviewed by reporters and he appears on TV and he's asking for people to help him look for her and he's asking if anybody has any information. Police finds the CCTV footage. They find Jesse pretty easily and they interrogate him on Grace's whereabouts. He confirms they had a date. She left his apartment at around 10 p.m. And since they liked each other's company so much, they even decided to meet again for a second date the next day on her birthday. While he is in the interrogation room, he sees a police officer walk by and he asks him this.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?
Isn't that the weirdest, most incriminating question anybody could ever ask? I mean, he just said they had a date, they planned for another date. Up to that point, there was nothing the police said that could have made him come up with a question like that. He had just told them about the date and plans for a second date. There was really no reason for him to ask this question. But obviously, the police officers, they have some information and they just, press him during the interrogation, and he ends up changing his story. He says they had sex at his apartment, she spent the night, and he woke up the next morning and he found her dead on the floor. He said he panicked, he put her in a suitcase, and he disposed of her body.
Did you kill Grace Millane? Okay.
But again, he changes his story. Now he's saying that she came to his apartment, they had rough sex, and he accidentally choked her. Makes as much sense as people saying the aliens are coming to pick us up to go to the next level.
Jesse Kempson, you're under arrest for the murder of Grace Millane.
I'm not a fan of camera surveillance, but in this case, it actually helped apprehend Jesse, and it also gave us a very precise timeline of how things happened that night. So we already saw the footage of the date on December 1st. The date went well up to 9:41 p.m. when she is last seen on CCTV, and it went so well, in fact, that she accepted to follow him to his apartment. On December 2nd, Jesse is seen purchasing cleaning supplies, a shovel, a suitcase, and a carpet cleaner. And you can see he was smart enough to pay cash, but he was dumb enough to forget about CCTV. And guess what he does that same day after he murdered Grace? He goes on another Tinder date in the afternoon. I mean, I guess that's what you do when you're completely panicked and you accidentally just murdered someone. On December 3rd, he disposes of Grace's body in a shallow grave in the Waitakere Ranges. I'm sorry, I'm probably not saying that right. So the Waitakere Ranges are, it's actually a national park located about 20 kilometers west of Auckland. So he buries the body of Grace 12 miles west of Auckland in a national park. The police investigation also revealed this. At 1:30 a.m., Jesse Googled Waitakere Ranges. He might as well have Googled where to dump a dead body near Auckland. By then, she was dead, so he probably killed her between 9:40 when she's last seen on CCTV footage and 1:30 when he was Googling that. Around the same time, so about 1:30 in the morning, he Googled pornography, because that's what you do when you just killed someone by accident. You watch porn. Around 6 a.m., this is truly mortifying, but around 6 a.m., he looked up rigor mortis, extra large bags, and what's the other one? Carpet cleaner. I mean, come on. Does he not know you can find that information? CCTV? Phone search? Sometime in the afternoon, and you remember that afternoon he was on another Tinder date with someone else, and I'm just picturing him doing that while he sat at the table waiting for his next day to arrive. He looked up flesh-eating birds and are there vultures in New Zealand. Sadly, that's not the worst part. The most incriminating stuff they found was pictures of Grace. They found 7 pictures of her dead body in his phone. Trophy. As it turns out, Jesse is a compulsive liar, and this will be confirmed by many testimonies. To one of his former living girlfriends, he said that his family was very rich. They owned many restaurants in Australia, and they were about to buy a couple more restaurants in New Zealand. He also told her he owned a very expensive BMW and a house that was worth over $1 million. And yet, they both live in a house share where he rents a room for $170. And she never saw that fancy BMW. His flatmates who were living with him in that house share also reported that they were so uncomfortable around him that they would try to avoid being alone with him in the house. It got to the point where they met in the living room one day and they were discussing how to kick him out. Can you imagine the level of anxiety having to tell him that, having to confront him and possibly make him very angry? All of them were terrified. It turns out he was actually in his room and he overheard. He came in the living room and he said, "My mom just died and I have to go to Australia for a few days because that's where she lived." Of course, that wasn't true. She was very much alive. He packed his stuff, he left the next day, and they changed all the locks. Part of the lies that he told many people around him included him having cancer, him being an orphan, him graduating from law school. He also said he had a cousin who was a member of the All Blacks team. It's the national rugby team. And he also said he was a member of the national softball team and he was making a lot of money, yet he never paid his rent. He probably also told a lot of lies to Grace, and the only one that was verified was him telling her that he was a manager for an oil company. And the way police was able to verify that is, well, I mean, obviously she couldn't attest to it, she was dead. During the date, she was actually texting a friend and she was telling her about, how the date was going. But at the time, she doesn't know he's lying. She's just telling her friend about the guy she just met. That friend kept the messages. And at first, she said that it did sound a bit odd that her friend Grace would meet such a successful businessman. But it does happen. It's a possibility. But where she did get a bit worried was when Grace started making typos in her text messages, and she also kept saying that she loved her and she missed her. And yes, Grace is the kind of friend who expresses her love to family members and friends, but when she does it that much, it usually means that she's a bit drunk. But she was on a vacation, she was having fun, she was on a date, and her friend probably just assumed that she felt safe enough to drink to the point of being tipsy. The most incriminating lies are the ones he told his Tinder date on the day of the murder. He told her he was a police officer and all of his friends were also police officers. Go figure why he said that. For some reason, during the conversation, he also tells her he was having a hard time finding a duffel bag that was big enough for his sports equipment. What he really meant was a bag big enough for a dead body. And while he was talking about police stuff, he said, "It's scary how guys can make a wrong move and go to prison for the rest of their lives." End quote. He also told her that he heard, as a police officer, of a guy who asked his girlfriend to have rough sex involving strangulation and suffocation. It went wrong. He tried to revive her, but she died anyway, and he got done for manslaughter. It didn't seem suspicious to this woman because, I mean, he's talking as a police officer, but she did feel uncomfortable and she changed the subject. It really sounded like a confession. Am I right or am I not wrong? So, as I said, he had been arrested, he had been interrogated, and he confessed to the murder by accident. And on December 10th, he made a request for a suppression order to be given a fair trial. A suppression order or a gag order, I think it's called gag order in the USA. It's when your identity is concealed and the press cannot leak your name and photos to the public. They can talk about the case, they can say anything they want, but no pictures and no names. And that's why in some of the footage I was able to collect, we can see that his face was blurred, especially on the Tinder date he went to on the day of the murder, and that woman's identity was concealed for her protection because she was a witness in the trial. Grace's family actually saw the positive side of the suppression order, and they said that instead of focusing on the killer, people would focus on Grace and her life and the amazing person that she was. A suppression order is usually to protect the defendant, the victim, or their families, and I think it's fair. I think in some cases it's fair. I mean, I would agree that families need protection, even if it's the family of a killer or a defendant. I don't believe you should be associated with someone you're related to just because they're family, especially when they've done something as horrible as this. I don't know. Do you agree? What's your opinion on that? Let's talk about it. Leave a comment. About a month later, on January the 16th, 2019, Jesse Kempson pleads not guilty and the trial starts almost a year later on November 2019. It lasts only a couple weeks and he's found guilty. And 3 months later, on February 2020, he's sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years. FYI, in New Zealand, when found guilty of murder, the minimum sentence is life in prison with 10 years without the possibility of parole. And it will go higher depending on the circumstances of the murder. The autopsy confirmed strangulation, but he never denied that. And he even claimed that she's the one who asked to be choked. It could be true, even though he's the one with a history of violent behavior and violent sex preferences. And that was the essential issue at the trial. Did she consent to the choking? Was it really an accident? Some experts were called to the stand to explain how much force you would need to strangle someone to death. Apparently, it would take at least 90 seconds, most likely longer than that. And most importantly, the person would lose consciousness at some point long before dying. The autopsy also revealed bruises on Grace's neck, on her collarbone, and on her shoulders. I mean, sex? Really? I thought it was just here. How can you have bruises like all over here? It doesn't make any sense. If you're into that kind of stuff, can you explain to me how that would make sense? Thank you. The examiner confirmed that to get such bruises, you would need significant force to cause them, obviously. He said it would take 4 to 5 minutes for someone to die from choking, and it would require quite a bit of strength. But it could take as little as 10 seconds for someone to pass out. People can consent to extreme sexual practices, said the defense, but one of the judges responded that if it gets to the point where it's that dangerous and risky, it should not be permitted. During the trial, Jesse is seen holding his head in his hands when graphic details are discussed, and the only glimpse of emotion he showed was when he left the courtroom and he was rubbing his eyes as if he had been crying. But do we really care about that emotion? Self-pity? Nah. Okay, this next part is a bit confusing, but I will try to be as clear as possible. One of Jesse's ex-girlfriends filed a complaint against him for sexual abuse, emotional abuse, death threats, and a couple other things. It was 8 charges in total, and that happened around the time when he was pleading not guilty for the murder charge. He also drained her bank account. He held a knife at her throat once during sex, and he does like it rough. She said she reported that he hit her for the first time after they had an argument, and after that, the violence just escalated. He terrorized her for months, and that included the death threats and the physical abuse, and also humiliating sexual acts. He actually told her that he was working for the CIA and he was sent to kill her and her family if she didn't do everything that he asked her to do. She said she felt trapped. She had just moved into this new apartment. She couldn't afford to move out. And she was genuinely scared to death that he would kill her if she left him. Eventually, she obtained a protection order right after she ended their relationship. But she felt guilty of Grace's murder. She felt like if she had filed a complaint, it could have maybe prevented her death. I understand why she would feel that way, but honestly, she just protected herself. She did all that she could do. She got a restraining order. She was brave enough to get out of this toxic relationship. There's no way she could have known. I mean, I guess she was probably just too distraught to even think about him doing that to someone else. I really don't think she should blame herself. But then again, if it was me, I think I'd probably blame myself. During this other trial, Jesse showed absolutely no remorse whatsoever. He didn't even try to apologize to her. And you could think that it's because he claimed he was innocent and she just fabricated the entire story. Who knows what goes through his mind? And it's not like she was the first person saying that he was violent and abusive. Of course, he denied all the charges at this trial, the sexual assault, the violence, the death threats, like all the charges, he just denied them all. He said it was a difficult relationship, but it was not a violent one. On October of this year, 2020, he was found guilty of all 8 charges.
I'm sad. And I'm depressed and I'm suicidal from months of abuse by this man. I didn't want to bring up my past again, but I also wanted the truth to be out about who Jesse is and the pattern of behaviour and how this whole thing could have been avoided. It really could have. I was Grace's voice, and I will be Grace's voice.
Wait, there's more. Even though Jesse's identity could not be revealed because of the suppression order, it was leaked to the British media and the Australian media. I mean, a suppression order is only enforced in the country it originated from, so the international press could safely reveal it and not face a lawsuit. The law in New Zealand applies in New Zealand. When the information was leaked, another British woman saw Jesse's face on the British media, and she recognized him. The photo she saw was actually a picture that he had used in his Tinder profile. And it turns out this woman had been raped by Jesse 8 months before the murder. She spoke to her boss, to whom she was very close apparently, and he encouraged her to go to the police. So this woman, who will remain anonymous, just like the other one from the second trial, she told them what happened that day. She met Jesse on Tinder as well, his hunting field. They went on a date, they had dinner, they had a few drinks. She reported that during the date she was texting 2 friends and he got really, really angry. And not because she was texting, because granted, some people find it rude. He was not upset for the texting, he was upset because the 2 people she was texting were boys. After the date, They got into his car and he said that he wanted to find an open store to get more alcohol, but he pulls up in front of a motel. At first, she's uncomfortable, but she's thinking, I'll just get in for a few minutes and then I'll get myself a ride home. So they're on the bed and they're kissing, but she doesn't want to do more than kissing. When she refused to have sex, he got angry and he said to her that he had been treating her like a princess. He paid for the dinner, he paid for the drinks. So according to him, that's a valid claim he made. I paid for stuff, now you owe me sex. I'm not going to go into details, but he would not take no for an answer, at which point she just froze in fear. She explained that the reason she didn't go to police before is because she was scared he would track her down. She specified that this whole time she would wake up at night screaming and crying, having flashbacks of that night, and she was just balls out terrified. She would always check that the front door was locked 3 times before going to bed, and she was just scared that he would come after her. So there was a third trial for that, and Jesse said he thought she wanted to have sex. He said he thought her going back to his motel room and them kissing and everything just made him think that she consented. But she claimed she said no many times. She was okay with kissing, but she never consented to sex. No means no. No doesn't mean keep trying or do whatever you want, regardless of what I say. He was found guilty anyway of the rape on October 2020. After the verdict, he said to the judge,
You're so full of shit. You have no reason to convict me. You're full of.
the reason all 3 trials were separate is because Jesse made the request. He didn't want the charges for rape and sexual violence to be part of the murder trial. Probably a stupid attempt to have a lesser sentence. Also, at the rape trial, he didn't want a jury, he just wanted a judge. Like that was gonna make a difference. Everybody agreed to say that Jesse had a troubled upbringing. He had a violent father, a mother who rejected him. That can definitely explain his resentment towards women, but it doesn't mean he shouldn't be held accountable for what he did. Am I right or am I not wrong? And some agreed that if it wasn't Grace, it definitely would have been somebody else. Other Tinder dates confirmed he liked SM and bondage and choking. I mean, it's okay to have your sexual preferences, but that definitely shows that he was a violent person. Here's a summary of convictions and sentences. I know it was confusing. It was confusing for me. Jesse Kempson was arrested on December 2018, just 6 days after the murder. On November 2019, so about a year later, he was found guilty. 3 months later, in February 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years without parole. October 2020, he is found guilty of the sexual violation and 7 other charges. The same month, October 2020, he is found guilty of rape, and on November 2020, he's sentenced to 7.5 years for the sexual violation and the 7 other charges. And the same month, November 2020, he was sentenced to 3.5 years for the rape, a total of 11 years, plus the 17 for the murder. And the last thing that happened in this case was December 2020, I think it was on the 23rd, something like that. It was pretty recent. He lost his appeal against the murder charge and the suppression order was also lifted. That's why his face is all over the news now. I want to say the year 2020 was pretty bad for everybody, but must have been fun for him. This tragedy deeply affected the people in New Zealand, as you can imagine, although a couple journalists spoke of the missing white woman syndrome. I didn't know that was a thing. What is the missing white woman syndrome? Apparently, it's when a typically white, conventionally attractive white woman goes missing and the media just give it too much attention, much more than if it was, say, well, anybody else really. I mean, it does make sense that when someone goes missing and they're traveling, it does get international attention for very obvious reasons. Is it really fair to say that white privileged women get more attention? I don't know. I think some people would say yes. I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, Grace's family was very satisfied with the verdict and they said Grace was a kind, fun, loving daughter, sister, granddaughter, niece, auntie, cousin, and friend with her whole life ahead of her. She was enjoying the first of what would have been a lifetime of adventures before her life was so cruelly and brutally cut short by her murderer. Her sense of fun, her sense of adventure, her love of travel and exploring, along with her ability to light up any room she walked into with her generosity of spirit, are memories we as a family cherish and will forever remember. Grace, you are and will always be our sunshine.
Grace was taken away from us in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives had been, and family had been ripped apart. This will be with us for the rest of our lives. Grace was a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Grace was our sunshine, and she will be missed forever. She did not deserve to be murdered in such a barbaric way on her OE year. We would like to thank several people. Auckland Police Force, been professional, diligent and thorough all through this investigation. A special thank you to Detective Inspector Scott Beard, Detective Senior Sergeant Greg Brand and Detective Tony Jordan. Last but not least, we would love to thank the people of New Zealand. They've opened their hearts to Grace and her family. I cannot express our gratitude enough for all the offers and gifts of kindness that we have received over the last year. Finally, we must return home and try and pick up the pieces of our lives and day to day without our beloved Grace. Thank you.
Sadly, Grace's father passed away on November 2020 from cancer, but I find comfort in the thought that at least he got closure with the verdict, and he left knowing that Grace got justice for what happened to her. The Prime Minister of New Zealand also spoke, and she apologized to her family.
I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
The Sky Tower was lit in a dynamic white in memory of Grace, and vigils were held in different locations in the country. Also, a Haka was performed for Grace and also women who are victims of domestic abuse. A Haka is a ceremonial dance in the Maori culture. If you don't know what a Haka is, you should check out YouTube videos. They're so beautiful. One of my favorite ones is one that was performed at a wedding. I'll share a link in the description box if you want to check it out. And that concludes the tragic story of Grace. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this case is because if you know me, you already know that I love traveling myself, and whenever I travel, and most of the time I'm by myself, I love to meet people. I'm safe about it. I'm not saying that Grace wasn't. I'm just saying that I usually am, and I think I've been lucky. I think I can say that I've been lucky, and so far I've only met amazing people, and I've made friends everywhere in the world I have been to. And I don't know, it's just that this case made me think about that, made me think about, you know, meeting strangers and trusting them. I don't know, it just made me think about it, and made me sad for her that she was just unlucky. She ended up meeting the wrong person. I don't think there was anything she could have done differently, you know? Time for the random item review. I don't know why it took me so long to talk about food, but tonight we're talking about food. Food is life. Food is my life. Coconut is everything. I'm pretty sure this brand exists everywhere. I don't know, I'm not sure. This is like a vegan, sugar-free yogurt. It doesn't have anything but coconut. It is absolutely delicious. If you're used to too much sugar, well, for your health, you should cut it out. And if you want to put something in it, I would suggest chopped up fruits or maple syrup or honey, but don't overdo it, okay? Guys, that's it for me. Again, thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It goes a very long way into supporting my channel, my very small channel, but it's a channel anyway. And I'll see you soon. Bye.